So while there are a number of positives to take from the game, unfortunately it finished at the Amex. Brighton 3, West Ham Utd 2. Unfortunately, we didn't get the result that we wanted. The result probably fell in the hands of the right team just because we couldn't see the game out, which is seeming to be a bit of a consistent thread that we're following at the moment. I thought we were probably going to come out of this game with a draw. That was sort of before we kicked off. So I'm a little bit gutted, obviously, from the scoreline, as I'm sure we all are. Again, it's sort of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Again, like I say, pretty common. That to be said, though, give you sort of a general overview of the game, I thought, it was fairly slow-ish in the first half. I felt both teams were pretty sloppy, but it kind of made for some fairly interesting viewing, just because it wasn't so cagey or as cagey as we thought it would be before. A couple of glimpses of hope here and there. I believe we hit the crossbar at one point from a Souček header, just tipped onto the bar from the Brighton keeper. Quite unlucky, but to be honest with you, I don't know that the goalkeeper had to do much. I think it probably just would have hit the underside of the bar instead of the top side. So, but still, some positives here and there. I didn't feel like we were sitting back as much as we normally are. There was much less sideways and backwards than usual. Not exactly sure for the reasons of that, but just seemed to be a little bit more forward thinking, which was nice to see. Brighton being a fairly possession based side as well. I think they gave us a few more gaps in the middle of the field, which meant that we could be a little bit more creative in the way that we went forward. Not everything was so locked down. I think a pretty simple, straightforward way to beat West Ham at the moment is just sit back and, the low block, park the bus, whatever it is that you want to call it, because our creativity is low. Just hit us on the counter-attack and you've pretty much got us bang to rights. But thankfully this game was a little bit more open, so it was a bit, nicer to watch. I'm not so sure that I was the biggest fan of the opening lineup. It did feel punitive, not including Fullrkug, though, post the game, Potter has, come out and said that, that wasn't his reasoning for being left out. So you can only take people at their word, can't you? So, however, there was quite a few songs around the stadium being sung about Fullrkug, and Brighton also singing songs back, and it's I think I watched Gio's video, and he was talking about the sort of a damning sign is when you start losing the away fans, and I wouldn't say that we've lost them at this point, but I would say we're sort of on their way. It's starting to get a bit of frustration now, and we're getting towards the end of the season, and hopefully with the summer transfer window we can get a bit more hope back into us. But I think that's the problem, is at the moment we've just really not got any hope at all. Look, we've got again pretty consistently, when you look at the stats, we're talking about 12 shots in total that we've taken, with 4 on target. So that's exactly the same statistic as our previous game with Southampton, and bar 1 or 2, almost identical as well with Liverpool. So we're fairly consistently with about 4 shots on target for the entire game, with 12 shots in total. Again, it doesn't pick the whole story, because obviously you hit the bar, that's not technically counted as on target, right? So, there'll be a couple of instances where we get really close, and these aren't just, skying them up into the top of the stands, or into the residential areas. So, it's not the most definitive metric, but it's a very good indicator, of course. Again, possession-wise, about 47% of the possession, so we're talking, middle of the road again, pretty half and half. A far cry from the days we used to have where, 20 to 30% of the possession in the game, but sometimes we'd eke a result out of those, but, that's an old story. But yeah, so with a bit more possession, but it's just don't seem to be doing a lot with it. So, it's something to work on, but, from all we know, all we're being told, and history would tell us that this is sort of Potter's style, really. You know, you play it back and forth until you find an opening and then try and exploit the opening. It's just at the moment, I don't think we have the quality or the balance in the midfield to really kind of, you know, open these other Premier League teams up to, you know, to get our forwards really working and really firing and singing for us. So it's a bit of a shame. But as I said, I think there were some positives in the sense of that, you know, we were able to be a bit more free-flowing in the way that we played. You know, I don't know if that's just because, you know, Brighton were on the same ticket as us. You know, Brighton also have, you know, not had a really good run of form, and neither have we, so that could also play its part. But look, you know, if we get down to reality and we just sort of look at the actual sort of the goals of the game, you know, Brighton, it was 2 long-range belters. The first goal, you know, was just I don't know, 5 or so yards outside of the 18-yard box. Great finish. I mean, and then the second goal, we're talking 30, 35 yards. These were just top world-class quality goals. Pretty difficult to argue against them, to be honest with you, other than, you know, probably being a bit nitpicky and just sort of saying that, you know, we did sit back off them a little bit. We didn't really close them down, which we should have done. But no one's really expecting you to score from those kind of distances. You know, normally with a tight defence, you know, 5 at the back or whatever it is that you're sort of playing, you know, you've with a lot of people behind the ball, it's kind of seen as a bit of a, you know, a jewel in your crown or whatever it is, that people are taking all these long range shots because they can't penetrate your defence because they're quite low percentage. But they scored 2 of them this game, you know. So I mean, after you score the first one, you probably want to start really thinking about closing people down, especially towards the end of the game when everyone's a bit tired. But that didn't happen, you know. But as I said, being a bit nitpicky there, to be completely honest with you, because we are really talking about world-class finishes there. Really picked out the part of the net that, you know, Areola was really going to have no chance with. And I think on a couple of them, certainly the second one, I think the flight of the ball was hidden behind, you know, a couple of our players. So even then, Areola saw it quite late, which you've got to really from that sort of distance, because I don't think it had like the most power on it. You know, travelling quick enough, of course, but you know, these things often happen with just a little bit of luck that, you know, goes your way or goes against you, right? So it is what it is. I mean, talking about the West Ham goals, it was good for Kudus to get a goal. Nice to have a little bit of confidence, hopefully, for him, although it wasn't a particularly good goal, so I don't know what he's going to take from that in particular. But just a little too late for Kudus, I think. You know, the season pretty much gone now. You know, he's been pretty underwhelming for us. You can see in the last few games that Kudus' confidence has just been absolutely through the floor. You know, and even after scoring that goal, you could see the relief come off him with the celebration. But, you know, he didn't go and do his normal sort of trademark celebration. You know, and I'm sure there's plenty of reasons for that. But most likely it was just he didn't expect to score it. He scored it and it was just pure emotion coming off of him. So, you know, fair play to you, mate. Well done. You know, again, say not a particularly good goal, like I said before, with both sort of sides of those kind of things. A little bit of luck is needed for these sort of things. Souček, really, really good goal, great finish. Bowen with the assist on that one, an incredible cross, bending that one round from the right hand side with his left foot. You know, Fullrkug just slightly underneath it, but again, just being there enough to distract. And then Souček was able to put that in the back of the net. So, you know, again, really, really good finish. And that brought us to 2-1 up, which was, you know, a very unexpected scoreline at the time, because, I mean, I'm probably the same as everybody else, right? In the sense that as soon as Brighton scored, I felt like, great, well, that's us not scoring for the rest of the game. So that'll be 1-2, maybe 3-0. You know, that was the momentum of the game in the Brighton team's hands. And so yeah, thankfully, as I say, we were able to get that equaliser from Kudus, and then the goal from Souček to put us 2-1 in front. And really, I think at 82, 83 minutes, something like that, you'd be forgiven for really thinking that you'd won the game at that point. Certainly, the commentary team were talking that way. You know, they're clearly not West Ham fans, but you know, to speak to that just a little bit. I mean, I did what I normally do in these kind of situations, certainly at the moment because of our horrendous league table positioning. I'll go on my phone and I'll search up the Premier League table. I'll have a look, and I think at that point we were sat 14th, nice and pretty, and I was quite pretty, but change your expectations. But yeah, nice and pretty at 14, certainly for the moment. And I took a screenshot of it, and I've kept it on my phone. And I did that because you've probably seen some of my previous videos, maybe if you've watched a couple of mine in the past, and if you have, thank you very much. Welcome back. That I know it's not going to last, and I was right again. I didn't think we were going to lose the game. I thought we were going to come out with a point, but again, as I say, we're snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Really not good at all. But look, we were playing better in the second half. I felt like we had a bit more control over the game for a while. Fullrkug, or just a striker, to be honest with you, I think just makes us better as a team, just gives us more threat up front. And it just means that it can distract their defence a little bit, just give us a bit more of an avenue, gives us more options. And it means that, as I said before on previous videos, that they're not just trying to, swarm Kudus or stop Bowen from cutting in and doing the normal Bowen goal, right? You need somebody to be able to take other players away to open up that space. And even on Souček's goal, you've got Fullrkug going up there challenging for it as well, who's an aerial threat. You've got Mavropanos at some point, not for that goal, but Mavropanos, who's also an aerial threat, albeit I think one goal from him, but even still, he's a tall lad. And then Souček, obviously, is the one who gets it done. But he's, that poacher type of person. He's just there, isn't he? He's always in the right spot. But yeah, so it's just a shame that he's not fit enough to play a full 90 at the moment. I just assume that's what that is. Speaking of fitness and whatnot, there was a substitute, really strange substitution. It's not fitness based, but just because it's a substitution, bringing on Sofal, taking off Emerson. But I think it was just a strange decision because normally in this kind of situation, what you'd find is that Emerson would go off, Sofal would come on, and then you would switch Wan-Bissaka and Sofal. Obviously, Sofal being the right fullback, and it didn't pan out that way. They kept Sofal on the left. Not really sure what was going on there. Maybe just a bit of an experiment. It's coming towards the end of the season. I don't hate that idea. By all means, do it. I can't hold Sofal really at fault for Brighton's second goal, which was Matoma. So it was a cross that went over, and I think it was Gomez. But Gomez was completely free. There was nobody marking Gomez at all. But to be fair, Sofal had two players to mark there. It was probably a bit too close on one of them than the other, if we're being nitpicky again. But Gomez being completely out there on his own. Somebody should have been picking up and there wasn't. He heads it back across the goal. Matoma's there in the 6-yard box. It's an easy tap in off the head, straight into the back of the net. Really weren't stopping that. But again, another problem with that is probably Kilman in his position. He was just completely asleep on that one, and starting to get really quite frustrated with Kilman at the moment. I don't know if that's a confidence thing on his part, but he really needs to start sorting himself out. Otherwise, I think he could be in danger of a move if that's not something that he wants in the summer. And I don't know that I would hate that, which is a strange thing for me to say, considering I was particularly pleased about his appointment at the beginning of the season. So, well, look, I mean, we used to have a problem starting games, didn't we? 1-0 down from the opening minutes, and now we've got a problem finishing them. So it just seems like we've got the opposite problem. In the middle, we seem fairly solid at the moment. In the middle minutes, not necessarily in the middle of the park. I think the middle of the park we're particularly weak, and that's where we need to focus on for our summer window. And we just can't finish them out. Just something psychologically is not ticking. It's not working, and we've got to figure that out. Potter. I don't know if any of you have seen the post-game press conference that Potter was in against the old Brighton backdrop. He was saying, look, he's just sick of talking about the positives, and I think that's his role, right? And he has to wear it. You get someone like Fullrkug coming out, he's got a bit more license to be a bit more bombastic with the way that he talks, and whereas Potter does have a responsibility to the rest of the team and the board, and he's got to keep a lid on his emotions in a lot of ways, and you can see that kind of thing being quite frustrating. He does get accused of being a bit of a mouse and a bit toothless. And I don't think that's the case at all. I just don't think you get to these kind of positions being that way. I just think that we don't see it. I just think that he's got a lot of restraint. I'd like to think that's what it is as well. We see a lot of glowing reports and reviews of him from our current players. Saying that if we keep, I think it was Todibo or something came out and saying if we keep the same manager next season, we're going to be. We're going to be firing on it, and hopefully that's true, right? Because we do need to give him a chance, and I do think he does deserve the window. We need to back him properly, and overhaul that midfield and come back next season with a renewed vigour and a bit more hope and a bit more attacking prowess. But yeah, I do feel sorry for Potter, to be honest with you. When I was listening to that interview. Not fully, of course. At the end of the day, we do need results. That's just the reality of it. And it's all very easy to sort of say with Fullrkug coming out first and saying, I could swear, or I could be more negative and stuff like that, and because if that's what he wants to get on the side of the fans. But yeah, I think look at the end of the day, if we're going through negativity, there's no point in being overly positive. No one wants this sugar-coated nonsense anymore. Not really. Not when you're going through that kind of situation. We want to hear how you're going to solve it. How are you going to get past this? And it's don't be sorry, be better. Yeah. But look, I'm going to wrap this one up. I mean, we went from 2-1 up to 3-2 down in the space of 4 minutes. It's not a good feeling, but look, we're mathematically safe now. We knew we would be, but mathematically we are now. Nothing to play for now except a couple of games left at Spurs and at Man U, which hopefully can help us just move up that table just a little bit more and finish the season with a little bit of dignity. Just by a little bit, by not being the worst of the rest.